Hey everybody. All right, so today we're going to talk about, I'm going to do a series of videos now. I think it's probably going to be 3 to 5 videos of different things that people find really hard to believe in the Bible. And we're going to talk about those things. All right, so I'm looking at this from 2 different perspectives, okay? Because before I became a Christian and I read the Bible, because I read the Bible multiple times when I didn't believe God or what it said. I used to believe that there was some wisdom in the Bible, that you could pick some wisdom out of it, but that most of it was just a bunch of gibberish written by man. It was works of the imagination. So when I read through these stories, I was like, yeah, there's no way this could happen. You know what I mean? It's just insane. Now that I'm a Bible believer, now that I'm a Christian, now that I have God in my life and I have Jesus in my world, I see things from a different light. And I've actually taken the time to do some research and look into things like archaeology, we'll get into it. So, in history is big, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about in this series is the slaughter of the innocents. This story is tucked away in the book of Matthew, and only in the book of Matthew. It's pretty much in the middle of the nativity scene. Alright, so the picture is the Magi, which most secularists claim are 3 kings, but the Bible never says how many there were. And it was probably a caravan of people. And they weren't kings, they were Magi. They were most likely remnants of a cultish group of people. They were like collectors of knowledge and readers of the stars and interpreters of dreams and stuff like that. And these guys were performing their pagan rituals, and they saw a star in the sky and they followed the star because they knew somehow that the star signified the beginning for the King of the Jews. So they went to Jerusalem. Naturally, they're looking for a Jew. They go to the capital of Judea. They go to Jerusalem, and they meet with King Harod. King Harod is called King Harod the Great, but a lot of people think that he was called King Harod the Great because he was great. He was not great. He was called King Harod the Great because he was a great builder, because he would build things. I've read reports about him that he would be really depressed for a long time, and he would stay in his room, and then he would come out and he would kill a bunch of people, and then he would be depressed in his room for a while, and he would come out and he would build something, and then he would go back, and then he would come out and he would kill somebody, and then he would go back and he would come out and he would build something. I've read psychologist reports that said he was probably a paranoid schizophrenic, which, because of the information that I have, is just plausible. So, the first thing I found when researching the slaughter of the innocents, okay? Oh, I never finished the story. So, the Magi go to meet with King Harod, and we're going to talk about King Herod's mental state at this time. We're going to talk about what was going on politically and geographically with the people and with King Harod. So the Magi asked King Harod, where's the king of the Jews to be born? The new king of the Jews. King Harod is the king of the Jews. So if somebody comes up to him and says, where's the new king? The first thing he thought of was, someone's trying to take my throne. But we'll come back to that. They searched the records and discover that the baby was supposed to be born in Bethlehem. So that's where the Magi go. Now, Jesus was not a brand newborn baby when the Magi went and found him. He could have been all the way up to 2 years old. He was probably closer to like 6 months or a year, maybe 18 months. But he could have been all the way up to 2 years old when this incident happened. Because there's not a time frame given from the Magi, but also because King Herod killed all the kids that were 2 and under. He knew that the baby had been born within that 2-year span. He just didn't know when. So that tells us that Jesus was born within a 2-year span of this incident, within 2 years of before the incident. So he was within 2 years of age when this went down. King Herod died in 4 BC. Two years after Christ was born, roughly. So, what we're assuming here is that this is at the end of Herod's life, when the slaughter of the saints would have happened, because he died right after Jesus was born. Okay? So the first thing I learned was that the slaughter of the saints is nowhere in history. It is only described in the book of Matthew. It's not in any historical document. There's no record of it happening. There's no talks of it happening. The earliest historian that we have is Josephus. And Josephus doesn't mention it. He wrote a huge 2-volume set on King Herod. And didn't one time mention the slaughter of the innocents. Didn't one time mention King Herod ordering his people to kill all the children in Bethlehem and the surrounding camps 2 years and under. All the male children. So, let's talk about who King Herod actually was. Alright, so King Herod was a friend of the Roman Empire. And in 40 BC, he was deemed king. So in 40 BC, alright, the Parthians come from one of the most enduring empires of the ancient Near East. So they occupied everything east of Israel, all the way into like India, China area. Okay, and so what happened was they invaded Palestine. Okay, and civil war broke out. It was chaos. So Herod had to flee to Rome. Herod was friends with a man named Mark Antony. Mark Antony was a general in Rome, really respected general in Rome. We'll talk more about him here in a minute. So while he was in Rome, he was buddy-buddy with everybody, and they made him king of Judea. They deemed him king of Judea. But they didn't give him a kingdom. He had to go and take Judea. So they gave King Herod, the great builder, a Roman army, a military force to be commanded by him. And he went to Jerusalem and took Jerusalem. See, I always thought that the Jews asked the Romans to come in and instill law and order. And if I'm wrong, email me and let me know. Because from my research, from what I'm looking into, from what I'm reading, from what I'm seeing, is that the Romans came into Judea because a Roman man who was named king by the Romans brought the Roman army in and took Jerusalem by force. So, Yeah, so Mark Antony was a general. We're about to talk about him right now. He was a general. He was a politician. He was influential. He was big. I'm sure most of you have heard his name before, Mark Antony. I've heard his name before. Antigonus was and Mattathias Antigonus, okay, was a person in Judea who kind of didn't want the Romans in there, you know. So with the help of Mark Antony, Herod killed him, and together they killed 45 of the leading men of Judea. Publicly executed them together, him and Mark Antony, Herod and Mark Antony. Okay, publicly executed 45 people, the leaders of these people. Okay, and that was in 37 BC, roughly 37, 38. In 30 BC, he strangled a man. What was his name? John Hyrcanus. Hyrcanus. Just over a rumor. He heard a rumor that this John guy was going to try to usurp the throne, so he caught him and choked him, strangled him to death. This dude was a killer. So I also, he drowned his brother-in-law, Aristobulus, who was a high priest. Remember, Herod is a Jew, all right, that the Romans made king. All right, I had to get some water. And the only reason that he killed his brother-in-law, Aristobulus, is just because he thought, like, at the time he was really paranoid. All right, he was starting, over time, like, his paranoia grew, and he was always worried about people trying to take his throne away from him, trying to take his power away from him. And when he looked at Aristobulus, he thought that Rome would like him better than they liked him. So he killed Aristobulus so that there was nobody that Rome would like better than him, to retain his power, to maintain his control. Okay. He also killed his mother-in-law. Her name was Miriam, in 29 BC, or 30 BC, roughly. Pretty sure he pushed her off a cliff, is what he did with her. Like, that's just crazy. And he set up within his group of people, within the church, within the population, he set up an internal network of spies. Okay? And this network of spies was specifically put together to eliminate people suspected of revolt. To include, he's killed 3 of his sons during the last 4 years of his life. He, in 7 BC, he killed 300 military leaders just because he thought they were going to try to take his power away. After that, over a period of time, he had numbers of Pharisees executed for rumors, because the rumors were that they were prophesying against him. They were prophesying that a new king was going to come to the throne, that the line of David was going to happen. These priests, see, the Bible says that prophecy didn't happen until John, but you're watching King Herod killing the Pharisees of all people. Okay, the Pharisees were against Jesus. They were not with him. They did not believe in him, and they are the ones that got him killed. The Pharisees are the ones that got him killed. It wasn't their hands that killed him, it was the Romans' hands, but they made it happen. The Pharisees made it happen. The Pharisees themselves, according to secular history, all right, the Pharisees were prophesying against King Herod, saying that a new king was on its way. So Herod was killing these Pharisees. Every time he found out that they were prophesying against him, he was killing them. Okay. So with that said, okay, when King Herod was dying, he was on his deathbed. His life was fading from his body. Okay, this is what history describes. He became worried that people would basically dance on his grave and celebrate his death, that he would not be mourned. So he came up with this idea, and he ordered his sister Salome to round up all of the head priests, all the leaders from Jerusalem, and stick them in this hippodrome. And his command was that as soon as he died, all of them should die. That way, when he dies, people will mourn. People will mourn on the day that he dies. And that's what he wanted, was for people to mourn on the day that he dies. And he was going to kill a large group of people in order to make that happen. So with all that said, let's talk about what we know about King Herod. King Herod would kill absolutely anybody at any time, in any way, didn't care. Chopping off people's heads, strangling them, executing them, sons, daughters, wives, mothers-in-laws, old ladies, children, doesn't matter. He was a killer. Probably a paranoid schizophrenic, but killer, murderous. You know, Roman Emperor made a comment. Titus, I think is his name. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure his name here. I can look it up real quick. There was a quote by Augustus Caesar, the Roman emperor, said, "It is better to be Herod's pig than his son." So what this statement means, is as follows. King Herod was a Jew. He was Jewish. He was over Judea, the land of the Jews. And the Jews had nothing to, they didn't eat pig. They wouldn't eat it because it wasn't clean. Okay? Because of Jewish law. So what he's saying here is that Herod's pig has a better chance at a longer life than his own son. Herod's pig has a better chance at a better life than Herod's own son. Herod's pig is in a much better position than Herod's son. The pigs are safer than Herod's sons are, because Herod's just killing people. So, and the reason he's killing people is because he thinks they are trying to take away his throne. Okay, so what he's doing is he's killing anybody that's trying to take away his power. He's not willing to give it up. He will kill anyone that tries to take away his power. Okay. So, the Magi show up to King Herod's temple within the last 2 years of King Herod's life. He's paranoid. He's killing everybody, even his kids. Killing everyone. Just killing, murking them. And this group of people show up. These wise men. And they ask you where the King of the Jews is supposed to be born. That there's a new king being born. And he plays along, and they search through the records, and they find that the king is supposed to be born in Bethlehem. So Herod sends them out and says, come back and tell me what you find. In my opinion, in my belief, he was manipulating the situation. Instead of sending his own men out there, he was going to let these guys go find it for him. He was going to let them do the work. The Magi went, met with Mary and Jesus and whoever else was there, and then they went back a different way because they were warned in a dream, which is funny to me because the Magi were really big on dream interpretation. Okay? Really big. So they were warned in a dream. God spoke to the dream interpreters through a dream. Anyways, they went back a different way. So King Herod, when he realized that he had been duped, he had his people re-examine the information and examine the time frame that had elapsed and came up with that it was within 2 years of age. So Herod ordered all the baby boys within that time that were born within that time frame to be killed. So why isn't this written in history? You know, like, why weren't people writing about this? Like, there's different church traditions for different amounts of kids that have been killed. Okay, so I'm gonna Google that real quick and get a good response. Okay. The trick to Google is asking specific questions, not really vague questions. You ask a vague question, you're going to get a bunch of vague responses. I don't really trust Wikipedia because anybody can change, like anybody. Like, I can click on a Wikipedia ad, go in there and change what the definition says. You know, so that's not something that's really trustworthy to me. Okay. Okay, so one tradition, here we go. One tradition says that there was 14,000 children that were slaughtered. 14,000 children. That is a lot of kids. There's another one for 160,000. 144,000 children were murdered, which I think that's a later tradition based on the 144,000 ones that God has in Revelations. I think that's... Anyways, so the Catholic Church, and we all have mixed feelings about the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was like, all right, let's figure out how many really died. So they got down the information of Bethlehem at the time, archaeological, scientific information that tells us what the population probably was. And the population was probably 12 to 1,500 people. Okay? So if there's 12 to 1,500 people, you know you're not going to have 14,000 kids. All right? That's just crazy, man. I don't even want to touch that subject. And you're definitely not going to have 144,000. You're not going to have 160,000. No. So they did the math and they estimated, they added in infant mortality rate, starvation. Sometimes dads would just kill their babies, infanticide, you know what I mean? They ruled out, or they included those statistics in their equation, all right? And they decided that Herod killed between 6 and 20 children. 6 and 20. Between 6 and 20. So, if you really think about it, that's probably the reason why it wasn't mentioned. Because this dude's out executing military leaders, political leaders. He's strangling people to death. He's grouping people up in a hippodrome trying to have them assassinated. He's killing priests for preaching the word of God. He's just going insane. And, you know, killing a couple babies, like, isn't that big a deal. Josephus was a historian for a Greco-Roman audience. And what that means is you have to look at the culture for the Greco-Roman world at the time. And no one cared if King Herod killed a bunch of babies, a bunch of Jewish babies. You know what I mean? That child sacrifice was happening regularly in parts of the world still. Infanticide was happening regularly. You know, like the Spartans, like they had a rule where when the baby was born, it comes out and it falls on the ground. And if the dad doesn't want to pick it up, he doesn't have to. He can leave it on the floor and let it die. Like it's up to the dad. And that's the world he was writing to, you know. So that wouldn't have been something that anybody would have thought would have been important for them to document, because it wouldn't have mattered. 6 kids, 10 kids, versus all this other stuff that he did. He was on a murderous rampage for like 30 years, just killing people. You know, this one detail was something they might have overlooked, or I don't know. And Josephus was writing this information 100 years after it happened. 100 years after it happened. So it's possible that he didn't even know about it. You know, that, you know, it faded from history because it wasn't important to the rest of the world. You know, he did other things. Like this dude was remembered, he was called Herod the Great Builder. They just dropped the builder and called him Herod the Great, but it was Herod the Great Builder is what his name actually means. And it's because he built so many. He built entire cities. He built like 15 cities. Caesarea and all kinds of cities, port cities, and like he built the temple in Jerusalem, remodeled it to make it amazing, and built himself this huge palace. And like he was a builder. He built all kinds of things, man. He constructed massive buildings, massive building cities, and he was a builder. He built all kinds of stuff, you know, and that's the stuff that they were interested in. You know, the Greco-Roman world, because they were pagans. They had a different belief system than where we're talking about. So their priorities, what's important to them, what they want to know about is different. So it's possible that Josephus was catering to that when he didn't mention it. You know, but it's something that's completely in line with his personality, with Herod's personality. You know, it makes sense. Like it's not something that seems to be exaggerated. Like I think 6 to 20 kids is a way better number. You know, I think like to actually understand, it was probably a small, isolated incident. It was a small area. So all total with the surrounding camps and everything, it was probably 12 to 1,500 people, and that's just not that many people. You know, you go through a town that has a population of 5,000 people, and you can barely even tell you're in that town. So 1,000 people? That's a small little village. I mean, it's big enough to have a little bit of commerce and stuff going on, but it's not that big. 6 kids, 10 kids, maybe 20 at the most. At the very most, that's stretching it at the most. Yeah, it was probably not considered, like, we consider it today to be completely appalling. Like, all through time, through the medieval ages, famous painters have painted depictions of this slaughter of the innocents, is what we call it. We name it that because of the emotion that it invokes. That's how words have meaning, is because a word invokes an emotion, a word invokes a reaction inside of your body. And you understand what they're conveying because of the reaction that that word makes your body have. That's deep. So, I mean, I believe it. I think that just because it's not in later sources, Matthew is an earlier source. Matthew was probably written way earlier than Josephus was writing. Josephus was writing in the first century, like the middle of the first century. So he was like 130, I think. Matthew was written so about 85. That's not bad. 85. Yeah. So about 20 years before Josephus was writing, Matthew was written. So you can look at the book of Matthew and you can see the specific parts in Matthew where older traditions of Christianity, not of other religions, of Christianity, are. You can do the same with Mark. You can do the same with a lot of the books. And you can tell how old that information is. Like the book of Galatians, I watched a video the other day where the guy traced the information that Paul had all the way back to within +1 years of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Like the way he broke it down to me, and I'll do a commentary on this video. It was pretty awesome to watch. The way he broke it down, he traced the information all the way back to within 1 year of Jesus being crucified, and the resurrection story was there, and the empty tomb was there all the way back. The empty tomb was there. I love it. I love the Bible. It's so cool, because even if it has a story, and this is a story that a lot of critics would, I imagine a critic would point to and be like, that didn't happen. When I first started reading the Bible, I didn't believe that story was true. But when I look at who the characters are that are in the story, and the characters are real people, and the actions in the story match their actions in life, then there's no reason to say that it isn't true. Absolutely no good reason to say that it is not true. In fact, in my opinion, I've proved it. I think the evidence is clear that it's something he could have done. And I think it's something he would have done. I think I'm not sure why it's only in Matthew. Why it's not in any of the other Gospels, why it's not anywhere else. And that might be important, it might not, it would take a lot of research and study to figure that one out. But what it boils down to is our faith is based on the Bible. And there are stories in the Bible that the world is saying cannot possibly be true. So I believe that this is probably one of those stories, and that's why I chose it to do this video on. I think that the story is true. I don't know why it's only in Matthew. It doesn't really matter to me. Personally. What matters to me is that there's not details in the story that are fantastic or legendary or wrong at all. Like, you read the story and it's just a story of something that somebody does. Like, there's no magic miracles. There's prophecy, like the Magi, they were following this star, which I believe didn't have to be an actual star. Like there was how can I say this without causing trouble? They had prophecy that had been written down on paper that told them when a king was going to be born from the Jews. And they calculated that time, and when that time came, they traveled to Jerusalem, which is the center of the Jews, to figure out where this king was going to be born, because it was a Jewish king. Now that's just what I think. Some people think that it was a spirit or an angel that guided them. Some people think a lot of things. But I think they had the book of Daniel. I think they had the book of Daniel and the prophecies of Daniel, and they followed that to Bethlehem, to when Jesus was supposed to be born. But that's just my opinion. That's what I think. And it's completely 100% possible that I'm wrong. But there's nothing in the Bible that says that they had the book of Daniel. There's nothing in the Bible that says that they had any kind of documentation, books or scrolls that they were reading when they traveled. That's just, from my understanding, like, just think about who the Magi are and where they came from. They came from Babylon. They came from Babylon, and they were royal. Daniel was the head of the Magi. Daniel ruled over all the Magi. Daniel ruled over all the Magi. That's why I think they had Daniel's prophecies. That is why I think they went to Jerusalem to find the king that was to be born a Jew. Well, that was fun. I don't really like to share my own opinions like that because there's nothing really in the Bible that I can take and really back up what I'm saying. You know, like the only thing I can do is tell you, like, the book of Daniel describes how Daniel was in charge of the Magi. It tells how that happens. That happens before Babylon. No, maybe it didn't happen before Babylon. I don't know. Anyways, Daniel becomes leader of the Magi. Okay. Daniel prophesied when the Savior was going to come. Okay. Right when that Savior is born, the Magi show up. Looking for the king who's to be born a Jew. To me, that's just an irrefutable thing to see. There's a line drawn there. You know what I mean? Like from Old Testament to New Testament. Like this. To me, that's a highly possible scenario. It would be really cool if some of you guys would get back to me on that idea. I would really like to hear other people's opinions on that. Anyways, God bless you guys. He loves you. Later.